Meet Stephanie. She's a mother of 4 from North Carolina. She's a runner, an avid tennis player, and also went to war against her health insurance provider. Let's talk about that wild story and the tangible steps you can take when an insurance company inevitably tries to screw you. If you live in America, it's not a matter if you'll need health insurance, but when. Unless your last name is Musk or Gates, you most likely won't be paying for your healthcare out of pocket. No, you'll be relying on America's hybrid healthcare system. You see, many countries around the world offer what's known as a single-payer system, where the government provides healthcare to its citizens free of charge, usually funded by taxes. The US is a bit different, running a hybrid system in which government-funded healthcare covers some people and others are paid for by employers, individuals, or a combination of the three. It's rarely simple. And who manages all those claims? Mostly for-profit health insurance companies. Don't get me wrong, just because something is for-profit does not automatically mean it's bad. And also, I'm not saying healthcare outside the US is perfect. Just ask someone from the UK or Canada how they feel about healthcare, and I'm sure they'll talk your ear off. But the US health insurance system is deeply and uniquely flawed.
This morning, a young Kentucky man says his life is on hold because a heart condition left him with massive debt despite having health insurance.
Medical bills from her breast cancer and his open heart surgery nearly cost Mary McKernan and her husband Ron their home.
America spends more on healthcare than any other nation.
Let's get back to Stephanie. In 2021, she noticed a weird spot on her arm. She went to the doctor and they agreed to run some tests. It probably wasn't a big deal. Meaningless spots pop up every day, right? Not this time. Stephanie was at Disney World with her family when she got a call from the doctor. That spot? Melanoma, the most serious form of skin cancer. And even worse, this was stage 4 with further testing revealing that the cancer had spread from that small spot on her elbow to her brain and lungs. She felt doomed. Fortunately, her husband's job provided Stephanie and their family with health insurance. It kicked in right away, paying for the care she needed to fight the disease. It wasn't easy, but after 2 years of treatment, Stephanie was recovering and the cancer was going away, but with a side effect. The immunotherapy she was on started to have an impact on her joints. It became too painful to go up and down the stairs of her own house. She couldn't open a jar without crippling pain paralyzing her fingers, or even grip a steering wheel to drive her own children to school. So Stephanie had a tough decision to make. Stay on her immunotherapy to continue fighting her cancer, or come off the therapy so her joints could return to normal. An impossible choice. Scared and confused, she went to 2 doctors, and they both came to the same conclusion. Stephanie should stay on her therapy to keep fighting her cancer and relieve her joint pain with a drug called infliximab. God bless modern medicine. Unfortunately, Stephanie's insurance provider denied the medication, saying infliximab didn't meet guidelines for coverage and was experimental. Surely this was a mistake. I mean, 2 different doctors said she needed the medication. So Stephanie appealed and was denied. She appealed again and was denied then too. She was back where she started, cancer or joint pain. Which would you choose? For most Americans, receiving a rejection and 2 denied appeals would be the end of the road. The insurance company had made it abundantly clear that Stephanie was on her own. But it turns out she actually wasn't, and neither are you. Zoom out with me for a second. There are over 300 million people living in the US, and at one point or another, they're all gonna need health coverage. This means a lot of appointments, a lot of claims, and a lot of cash exchanging hands. It's simply too much for any human system to process all on its own. So most health insurance companies have started using AI and other computer systems to manage that chaos. And while that might sound efficient on paper, there are problems under the hood these companies don't want you to know about. Let me show you. First, do you know how a bank works? To put it simply, the bank promises to keep your money safe, so you deposit your cash and withdraw it when necessary. What some don't realize is that despite what your bank balance might say, your money might not physically be there. That's because the bank takes all the money from its customers and then uses it to pay salaries, give loans, invest, all sorts of things. Folks get alarmed by this, but it's actually how banks make money, and it's usually not a problem, especially because banks are FDIC insured. If you ever need your money, the bank will remember what you deposited and allow you to withdraw it, often drawing on funds from somebody else. At the end of the day, you still get your cash, so who cares if it isn't the same exact exact bills you deposited. But what would happen if every single person who used that bank all showed up at the same time demanding their money? The bank wouldn't be able to give everyone every dollar they're owed because they've already spent a lot of it. This is called a run on banks. And it's one of the worst things that can happen during an economic collapse like the Great Depression of 1929 or when governments fall apart. A health insurance company operates in a similar way. For example, let's create an imaginary health insurance company called Mike Care, and I get 100 customers. Every month, I charge each customer a monthly premium. Some of that money goes in my pocket for running the business, and the rest gets saved up for when one of my customers gets sick or injured. Mike Care would pay for the treatment for that customer, and they'd ultimately get healthy. Well, that's a hyper-simplified version of a health insurance company, and of course, the reality gets a bit more complicated. What would I do at Mike Care if all 100 of my customers needed care at the same time? Well, the money I collected from premiums wouldn't be enough to pay for everyone, so I'd have to start setting some rules. Maybe one of the patients wants an elective procedure like plastic surgery, so I decide we aren't going to cover that. Perhaps Mike Care will agree to cover all expenses of healthcare only after the patient has paid $5,000 of their own. I'll call that the deductible. What if one of my customers is lying about the care that they need in a scam to get money? Insurance fraud. I've got to be on the lookout for that too. Bottom line, I need to set some guardrails so that we have enough money in the coffers to provide care when people actually need it. Now and then, you'd see Mike Care start denying coverage. And in this very, very small scale and simplified example, you can easily see why that's important. But let's look at this at a bigger scale. Zoom out to what we actually see in the United States. What if Mike Care had millions of customers and millions of stockholders who own pieces of my now publicly traded health insurance company? Well, on one hand, I'd be very rich from owning that stock. And as CEO, my responsibility would not actually be to provide solely good healthcare. It would be to provide a strong financial return to my shareholders and my end-of-year bonus. There would be incredible pressure to raise premium costs, deny coverage, or at the very least make it harder to get approvals. You know, shady stuff. So as CEO of Mike Care, I have an idea. What if I build an AI supercomputer to oversee the whole thing and tell it to just increase the rate of denials by just a few percentage points? You know, random rejections left and right, even if the patient is genuinely sick and our policy is supposed to cover them. Well, patients would file appeals, hire lawyers, and sue me for failing to hold up my end of the bargain, right? Actually, yes, that is right, but it only works if patients actually do it. This is the bet insurance companies are making. They're gambling that you will be overwhelmed, confused, defeated, and not bother filing an appeal. In fact, they're just following basic statistics and human psychology. The more hoops they make you jump through, the less money they'll have to spend. Health insurers routinely deny 850 million claims a year in the US, and less than 1% of people appeal a denial. That's a lot of profit that is likely not legitimate. But get this, when patients do appeal, they win over 50% of the time. This is why you'll hear me say, always argue the bill. Okay, Dr. Mike, so I'm ready to appeal my denial. How do I do that? Let me give you a list of everything you need to get your money. Stick with me through the end here, and I'll also give you a shortcut that can make this much easier. First, find the specific reason you were denied, whether that's not medically necessary, experimental, or step therapy required. Then, build your evidence file. This is all the documentation of what you've been through so far. Doctor's notes, prior authorizations, clinical research, and proof of everything you've already tried. Next, a lot of people assume that their approvals and denials are up to the whim of the insurance company. Wrong. For all the power health insurers have in the United States, they aren't God. There are laws in place meant to protect you from predatory behavior. Quite often, when they deny your claim, they're breaking the law, and that's something you need to remind them of. Finding the exact language in your policy promising you care, or finding the law that protects you and shoving it in their face can move the needle. Then a common mistake we see is assuming that appeals are all about the medical justification of what you need. Now, of course, having a doctor insist you need a certain procedure or treatment is essential, but there's a massive human component to these appeals. They're usually reviewed by human beings who make subjective judgments, meaning you can tug at the heartstrings a bit. Writing a personal impact statement, conveying to the insurer what kind of difference in your life this care will make, can have a huge impact on the decision. decision. Once you have everything together, send it to multiple recipients at once, not just the insurer. Send it to your state Department of Insurance, Attorney General, Department of Labor, your employer's leadership, and your congressional representatives. The more surface area, the better. You can also request an independent medical review. Every state requires insurers to allow an external doctor to review a denial. It is one of the most underutilized rights you have and takes the decision entirely out of the insurer's hands. And of course, document everything in writing. Follow up every call with a written summary. A paper trail matters enormously if things escalate. Okay, that's pretty overwhelming, right? Sounds like you need to hire a lawyer or something to pull all this together. But what about that little shortcut I mentioned earlier? Stephanie actually used it herself. She wasn't some sort of healthcare administrator or legal super genius. How did she go toe-to-toe with the AI supercomputer designed to deny her coverage? By using an AI supercomputer designed to win. It's called Claimable, an AI platform designed to appeal health insurance claim denials. Let me say this right up front. This video is not sponsored. I have no financial interest in the company. You see, earlier this year, I was lucky enough to be named as one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in healthcare. Not bad for someone who reacts to memes. Anyway, at the celebratory dinner, I met another member of the list, Dr. Waris Bakari, co-founder of Claimable, who told me all about what they were doing. After hearing what he had to say, I knew I had to make this video. Stephanie used Claimable to file a new appeal. Their system helped her organize all her documentation, her impact statement, as well as medical case studies, legal statutes, and clauses in her policy to create a comprehensive and optimized appeal specifically targeted at her insurer, her policy, and her case. Their AI knew exactly what info would improve her odds without Stephanie having to do any of the legwork. She'd been rejected 3 times in 9 months. But guess what happened just 2 days after appealing with Claimable? She won. What was their excuse? The denial of service came from a processing error involving a misapplication of policy. There was no intent to deny care. But the story's not over. Yes, Stephanie's insurer agreed to cover her infliximab. She was able to stay on her cancer treatment and her joint pain became more manageable. But the 9 months Stephanie had to wait before finally getting her joint medicine left irreparable damage to the joints in her hands. She'll be managing that pain for the rest of her life. She may have won the battle against her insurer, but they're directly responsible for her continued struggles with her joints. I'm just so fed up with seeing my patients, my friends, my family constantly fighting these health insurance companies and losing an uphill battle. Whether it be with Claimable or similar apps like Counterforce Health, Fight Health Insurance, Appeal Armor, and many others, I hope you feel empowered to stand up for yourself in the face of these billion-dollar health insurance companies and get what's owed to you. In fact, there's one other doctor out there named Elizabeth Potter who has been making health insurance companies pretty angry themselves. Click here to check out that interview with her where she tells the entire story of how her insurer called to deny her patient's surgery as it was happening. And as always, stay happy and healthy.